You've probably been seeing a bit of this lately. That is to say, a bronze ram that belonged to a Roman warship that was found off the coast of Sicily and dated to the mid-3rd century BC. But what I want to talk about is the design. Why do they often have that design? This is the athlet ram, and it dates to the 2nd century BC, and as you can see there, it has a very similar design. And this design, in fact, was quite common, but it might not be the design you think of. If I was to ask you, or even myself, to sit down and design a naval ram, I'd probably come up with something a bit more pointy, and that might be a good idea, but it also had a downside to it, because what you didn't want in any naval battle is to become fixed to the enemy ship. That is to say, if you're trying to ram it, because if you're trying to ram it, you do damage and you get away. And that was testament to the crews. So often in ancient history, you'll hear about how skilled the crews were. And that was really about how mobile the ship was. And if you're purely there to ram an enemy ship, you don't want to stick around too long. So the crews would have to learn how to backwater at the right time, get the angle right to make sure that you didn't stick in that enemy ship. Because the last thing you wanted, again, if you're trying to ram, because I appreciate there were different types of tactics used by different ships, but if you're there purely to ram a ship and get out, you do not want to be stuck in a ship that's sinking. So the question is then, why this design? So let's start with the basics there at that end. So you've got two features really. You've got a wider area and you've got those sort of 3 levels of blades. So when you talk about the wider area, that's good because you're going to cause a wider area of impact. It's going to cause damage across a larger area, which is obviously a good thing. And in terms of speed, it's been estimated that between 1.3 and 3 knots and higher would be the speed that you want to get your ship at before you rammed, because that would cause the necessary damage to those planks. And it's on the topic of those planks that we come to with those 3 blades, because again, what's been argued is that this design was all about unpicking the planks as well as damaging them, because this didn't just cause damage to the planks, it caused damage at the joints of the planks. Now, without getting too much into it, the way that ships were made at that time, and again, generalization caveat, is that you used Phoenician joints, or certainly Phoenician joints would have been used when the Roman warships were coming up against the Carthaginians. And that's a way of the planks of wood in the ship being joined together. So what this particular design was very good at doing was causing damage to the planks, but crucially, damage to those what's known as tenons, those joints between the planks, which meant effectively you would cause a hole, but you could also cause damage elsewhere, sort of generally to the infrastructure of that area that you'd hit. In short, this was both a hammer and a lockpick. In a sense then, this design preserves that dynamic that you have generally with warfare, both modern and ancient. Namely, someone comes up with something that needs to be broken, people sit down and work out which weapon can best be adapted or which design might be best to do that. And there's a sort of evolution, as it were, between armour and weaponry that you see all the way through history. And what obviously been worked out here is that this design was particularly effective at doing a number of things. First of all, it was going to cause the most damage, but it was also going to cause a type of damage. It was going to be the worst type of damage, if that makes sense. And presumably also it lessened the chance of the ship being fixed to that enemy ship and therefore being attached to a ship which was sinking, which again, in most conditions you didn't want. Oh, and don't forget, click and follow.